Presidential Petitions Tribunal rules on 2019 election. Federal government begins evacuation of Nigerians. 320 Nigerians to leave South Africa. In international news, Scotland's highest court overturns last week's ruling, says Prime Minister's suspension of Parliament is unlawful. And in sport, Nigeria defeats Sudan to qualify for AFCON under 23.
This is ANN News.
I am Olajumoke Olatunji. The Presidential Elections Petitions Tribunal has just delivered its judgment in Abuja and has handed President Buhari victory in petition filed by Atiku Abubakar and the People's Democratic Party questioning Buhari's re-election. The tribunal has held that there is no provision for transmission of results electronically in the Electoral Act as amended. Justice Garuba said the evidence and report of one of the petitioner's witnesses cannot be relied upon that there was indeed INEC server or servers because it is unreliable, hearsay, and lacks probative value. The tribunal said one other petitioner's witness cannot be regarded as an expert because he admitted that he was not certified by any institution. Justice Garuba ruled that the witness lacks value and is not worthy of being considered. The tribunal went on to consider the question of whether Buhari was elected by a majority of lawful votes cast in the February presidential election. It ruled that Buhari was not only qualified but eminently qualified to contest the presidential election. The tribunal said Buhari's certificate from the Nigerian military is higher than the secondary school certificate stated in the constitution as the minimum academic requirement for the election. The tribunal said the PDP had failed to further prove otherwise. The court held that the evidence tendered regarding Buhari's qualifications were not to be relied upon, since the PDP was not the original makers of the documents. Justice Garuba went on to rule against the testimony of another petitioner's witness who had admitted under cross-examination that he was not at any of the collation centers during the election process. The witness also revealed he has never seen or admitted to seeing any INEC server. The tribunal dismissed the petitioner's claim that Buhari gave false information about his educational certificate in an affidavit submitted to INEC. That affidavit was fundamental in nature to aid his qualification to contest the election. The Nigerian Union in South Africa says normalcy has been restored in some parts of South Africa, but that several foreign-owned businesses had remained closed for fear of resurgent attacks. NUSA President Adetola Olubaju says there are some displaced foreign nationals. Nigeria's High Commission and the consulate says the first batch of half of the more than 600 Nigerians have left South Africa. And it appears from all indications, failure of Nigeria and South Africa to curtail xenophobic attacks which escalated in both countries last week is now threatening their $60 billion bilateral trade relationship. 1,000 persons have reportedly taken refuge in halls set up for foreigners displaced by xenophobic violence in the Johannesburg region, even as some of them have been evacuated earlier today. Foreign trade figures from the National Bureau of Statistics show that in the first quarter of this year, South Africa was one of Nigeria's top 5 export destinations, having received goods valued at slightly more than 7% from Nigeria within the period. An international expert says the latest attacks on Nigerians in South Africa are beyond xenophobia, but driven more by stock economic tensions and growing inequality. The Department of State Services is asking Nigerians to watch out for those it says are out to destabilize the nation's security. A statement by DSS Public Relations Officer Peter Afunaya says the service is doing all to bring the subversive groups and individuals to the public. DSS says these elements are determined to exploit political differences, set the country on fire, as well as inflame passions across ethnic and religious divides with expected violent consequences. In business news, the Central Bank of Nigeria has released a revised regulation on electronic payments and collections for public and private sectors in the country. In it, the central bank has directed deposit money banks to accept only electronic payments of salaries, pensions, and taxes of public and private companies. This means payment instructions and associated schedules are no longer to be transmitted to DMBs through unsecured channels such as paper-based mandates, flash drives, compact disc, and email attachments. CBN says the objective of the regulation is to fully align with the core objectives of the National Payment System Vision 2020 to ensure the availability of safe, effective, and efficient mechanisms for conveniently making and receiving all types of payments from any location and at any time through multiple electronic channels. The Apex Bank says this would reduce transaction time and cost. Finally, in this segment, we're glad to report that some Ondo communities, including Ore, now have electricity after 20 years in the dark. Ore, headquarters of Odigbo local government area of Ondo State, was disconnected from the national grid 20 years ago for non-payment of electricity bills. The Chief Executive Officer of Click Connect Networks, Alex Ajikwe, says Governor Rotimi Akeredolu intervened before reconnection could take place. Ajikwe also said the presence of Ondo Linyu Industrial Hub in Ore has increased the internally generated revenue of the government.
Coming up, African stories. Mozambique government begins process to evacuate its citizens from South Africa because of xenophobia. And later, international news. Scotland's highest court rules Boris Johnson's suspension of parliament is unlawful.
You are watching ANN.
This used to be me. But that was before I got the perfect bag. It's handy and easy to use. All I need in one compact space, just like my MTN Extra Value plan. I used to get one plan for my calls and then try to remember which data plan worked for me. Roaming was a totally different ballgame. Not anymore. I've got the MTN Extra Value all-in-one plan. If you're a data buff like me, you get extra data with some talk time. And if you like to make calls, you get extra talk time with some data. And when I'm abroad, I automatically browse, chat, and call right on the same plan. MTN Extra Value was made just for me.
More of data or calls, whichever one you prefer. MTN Extra Value is made just for you.
Welcome back. This is ANN News. Now to a quick trip around the continent. Mozambique President Filipe Nyusi has issued a stern condemnation of the xenophobic attacks in South Africa. It says more than 500 Mozambicans have lost their homes because of the violence. Nyusi says his government has activated processes to evacuate affected Mozambicans from South Africa. Mozambique is the second African nation to recall its citizens from South Africa. Meanwhile, South African ministers in charge of security met on Tuesday and made stern pronouncements on clamping down illegal migration. Egypt says it wants the Sudan off the U.S. list of terror nations now that the country has a new civilian-led government. Sameh Shukri called for more support for the Sudan, which has been on the U.S. list of countries that sponsor terrorism since 1993. U.S. former President Barack Obama has begun a process to delist the Sudan, but the move was halted when mass protests began in December against former President Omar al-Bashir, who had ruled the nation for 3 decades. He was ousted by the military in April. Shukri says the Egyptian government is now working with Washington to get the Sudan off the list. He is the first foreign official to visit the Sudan after its new cabinet was sworn in on Sunday. Sudan says getting off the U.S. state sponsor of terror list is crucial to rebuilding the country and readmitting it into the international economy after years of sanctions. New oil deposits have been discovered in Kenya that analysts say would add more resources to the country's current oil deposits portfolio. But reporter Daniel Arapma says more than that, the oil find brings hope to local residents.
For many years now, residents of Turkana County have walked the dust balls of Lokicha, where temperatures can soar up to 40 degrees centigrades. People in this part of Kenya have fought and won many battles with famine. Life in this remote, dry part of Kenya cannot be for the faint-hearted. But despite the difficulties, many residents of Turkana County are optimistic about the oil find in their region, living each day with the hope that good tidings will spread across their land as oil begins to flow.
We are actually happy about the exploration of oil in Turkana County. It is actually one of the major hopes that the Turkana person who has been a pastoralist, who has been in the world of suffering, lack of water and what, we had banked a lot of hopes into the issue of the exploration of oil.
We believe that when you have oil, everything will be okay. Everybody will have cash of their own.
We ask God to bless us with more oil finds and other natural resources that we need.
The benefits of the oil find in Turkana has already started trickling in, with Lokicha town acquiring a few kilometers of tarmac road. Some residents were also lucky to find employment, especially during the early days of exploration.
On the side of jobs, we have had some casual labor offered to many of us, especially during the exploration period, despite being short-lived.
The needs of the Turkana people should be prioritized, and if that is done, then it will go a long way in solving their problems.
Ninaona itasaidia Mturkana wa kawaida.
The oil find in Turkana is expected to improve infrastructure across Kenya and also provide much needed amenities like clean water supply and hospitals.
As residents, we are still waiting. Maybe the benefits will come later.
The Turkana local government has already struck a deal with the national government on revenue sharing, as it will take 20% of the revenue. The local community will take 5%, while 75% will go to the national government. But with uncertainty still shrouding the entire oil find in Turkana, only time will tell if this oil find is the silver bullet that will transform this region for good.
Albinos in Malawi have always faced danger because of certain myths that have led to their attacks in the country. Like Malawi, many African countries also believe those myths had exposed albinos to danger. Association of People with Albinism has been active in efforts to destroy those myths and to create a safe environment for people with albinism. The latest effort is a beauty pageant for albinos held in the capital, Lilongwe. This is the country's first ever beauty pageant for albinos. There were cheers and ululations when albino contestants started across the stage. Mr. and Miss Albinism were crowned at the close of the pageants. There were 20 contestants, and 23-year-old Chikondi Kazanje won the Miss Albinism Malawi title. She said she would use her new position to help end the attacks against people with albinism. Albinos in Malawi have been attacked because of false beliefs that if used in magical potions, their body parts can bring good luck and wealth. More than 2 dozen have been killed since 2014, and more than 100 are missing.
Up next, international news. Scotland's highest court rules Boris Johnson's suspension of Parliament is unlawful. And later, sport. Nigeria defeats Sudan to qualify for AFCON Under-23.
You are watching ANN.
Welcome back. This is ANN News. In world events, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says he would annex the Jordan Valley in the occupied West Bank if he wins next week's election. Although such act would violate international law, he has boasted that the plan is supported by U.S. President Donald Trump. The Jordan Valley is a 2,400 square kilometer area that accounts for nearly 30% of the territory in the West Bank, which Israel captured in the 1967 war. The Palestinians covet the valley for the eastern perimeter of a state in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. Palestinians have called the Israeli leader a prime destroyer of the peace process. They have also said such a move would definitely shut the doors on any possibility of peace in the region. More than 400,000 Israelis live in West Bank settlements considered illegal by international law. Some 2.5 million Palestinians live in the territory. And Scotland's highest civil court has ruled that Boris Johnson's suspension of the UK Parliament is unlawful. The Court of Session found in favour of a cross-party group of politicians who had challenged the Prime Minister's move. The court's decision overturns last week's ruling by another court that the Prime Minister's move breaks no law. The government says it will appeal today's ruling. Meanwhile, Boris Johnson has had a series of defeats in Parliament in the last few days in his bid to take the country out of the European Union without a deal. Now, the bill introduced in Parliament to block the Prime Minister's no-deal move has become law. Kitty Logan reports from London.
The bill to prevent a no-deal Brexit passed by Parliament last week became law on Monday. That effectively forces the government to request a Brexit extension should there be no new deal negotiated with the EU by mid-October. A second government attempt to set a snap election sparked a furious debate. Opposition leader Jeremy Corbyn says he doesn't trust the Prime Minister. With Parliament now suspended for 5 weeks, there will be no election before the Brexit deadline of October 31st. It's the final blow in a series of defeats delivered by cross-party MPs opposed to a no-deal Brexit. Boris Johnson still has strong backing from Brexit supporters, angry that Parliament hasn't delivered on the 2016 referendum. But solidarity shown by MPs opposed to a no-deal has prevented the Prime Minister keeping control over his Brexit promises. Boris Johnson says he'd rather die in a ditch than not complete Brexit by the end of October. But that could put him on a collision course not only with MPs, but also with the law.
Venezuela once led Latin America in the battle against malaria and other diseases, but the country's economic crisis has sparked a resurgence of several illnesses which are creeping in across the country's borders into Colombia, Brazil, and further afield. Stephen Gibbs report from Caracas.
It's lunchtime in this community centre in Caracas. A free meal for young mothers and their children donated by a local charity. Of the 20 or so people here, we found 2 that had something in common. Both had been afflicted in the last fortnight by a mosquito-borne disease. 2-year-old Jose was recovering from a severe case of hemorrhagic dengue.
When we came back one day, he had blood coming from his ear and here. They sent me to a hospital where they said it wasn't dengue, it was a parasite.
It was dengue, and eventually Jose had to have a blood transfusion. He's fine now, but he is lucky. This mother, meanwhile, had just got over a bout of chikungunya, a debilitating virus.
I had fever, dizziness, I lost weight, and so did my child because I was breastfeeding.
Both said the situation was complicated by Venezuela's economic decline. Jose's mother said there'd been no anti-mosquito fumigation by the government here for 13 years. Stories like theirs are told millions of times over in this country, which is facing the most serious public health crisis in its history.
Problem in terms of scale will be huge in Venezuelan terms. We have almost last year close to 1.2, 1.5 million cases of malaria. Close to 10,000 cases of diphtheria and close to 9,000 of cases of measles.
The figures the doctor quotes are not official. That's because the government here has not released comprehensive data on diseases since 2006. Those on the front line in this fight are having to make some educated guesses. In the case of malaria, the disease itself carried some clues. Gene tests of infected patients in South America have shown that most infections originated in Venezuela. For Dr. Maria Lopez, president of the Venezuela Society of Infectious Diseases, the malaria example just shows how this country is in the midst of a perfect storm, facilitating the spread of disease.
The health situation here is serious. We are in a complicated humanitarian emergency because this is about health, but it is also happening against the backdrop of a social and economic issue which is only making things worse.
One issue she cites is that of water. As part of a general deterioration of public services, at least half of Venezuela's hospitals and millions of homes are without reliable running water, a major public health challenge on its own.
The economic collapse here has been a key factor behind the rise and re-emergence of several diseases, and it's left the government ill-equipped to tackle the problem.
When we return, sport. Nigeria defeats Sudan to qualify for AFCON Under-23. Please stay with us.
You are watching ANN.
Whether in your house, at your office, on your phone or online, we are there. We have the facts behind the headlines. We cut to the chase with the news you really need. We cover every angle. We are the bigger, better news network. We are African News Network. ANN. Watch ANN News on MITV from a truly African spirit. We are on the road every day, canvassing throughout Africa for news you really need. We follow the story everywhere, from every corner of Nigeria to the wide African expanse. We bring you what's making headlines. We connect you with news you can use. ANN, African News Network, in a truly African spirit.
Welcome back. This is ANN News in Sport. Nigeria's under-23 men's football team defeated Sudan 5-0 to book a place at the African Cup of Nations. The Nigerian team bounced back from a one-goal loss, handing them a ticket to the tournament. With the team's qualification for the AFCON Under-23 tournament, the boys would be expected to defend their title as well as fight for a spot at the Tokyo 2020 Olympics. And more than 5,000 athletes are in Ilorin for the 5th National Youth Games. Sunday Diary discussed this in Ilorin during a courtesy visit to the Kwara State Deputy Governor Kayode Alabi and his office ahead of the commencement of the Games holding at the University of Ilorin. Diary explained that the federal government is committed to reviving various sporting activities and culture of sport to discover young athletes who would go on to represent Nigeria, the state at the national and international levels. That is ANN News this evening. Thank you for joining us. For details on these and all the breaking stories, visit our website, annafrica.news. Conversation continues on our social media platforms, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at ANN Africa TV. I am Olajumoke Olatunji. Have a pleasant evening.